A very good evening. Firstly, a huge round of applause for Kartik because he's hosted us in a very short span of time. So, honestly, thank you. Like I said, you guys have heard enough, but he's right here. He's a very, very close family friend. Kartik was at Oxford, runs a bunch of news channels, runs one of India's largest print media newspapers, but also is a very, very, he has public service's heart at the bottom of his heart. And he recently got elected as a member of parliament, Rajya Sabha, one of the youngest in the country. And so I really wanted him to meet with all of you, share his experience of, being a young politician in this country, right? I mean, we've heard a lot of senior leaders speak, but he brings in a unique perspective where he's new in here in some ways, but he's also been there, and he tries to juggle a bunch of these businesses alongside, his office. So without further ado, Kartik Sharma.
Thank you, everyone. I'd like to welcome you home. He's been extra kind and nice to me, and like we say, in the Indian culture, in the Indian history, Indian tradition, guests are treated as gods. So please, all of you are welcome home, and I'd be happy to talk to you and share my experiences. So whatever you guys have in your mind, however you think I can perhaps discuss with you of what my experiences have been in the last couple of years, and especially with the new role that I had in the last 6 months, I'd be happy to share. Let me just introduce myself properly. I was at Oxford. I did my undergrad there. I did my master's at King's College in London. I was in England for about 7 years, and briefly worked for about a year over there. And then I came back. My family has been into multiple businesses, but I chose to start my own business when I came back, and which was in the media space. I launched a Hindi vernacular newspaper back in the day in 2006 and 7. And then I started with a host of regional channels and then subsequently national channels. And then we launched the Sunday Guardian, which is the #1 Sunday paper in the country back in 2010. And then we launched the Daily Guardian, the Business Guardian, and a host of a number of products. We have about 28 products which reach to roughly 600 million people directly, indirectly, through digital, satellite, print, and different manifestations. And we started building, in the last 4 or 5 years, we started building new verticals in sports, different communities within media, because we understood very early on that the future of media is not the way we see it, the way we've seen it in the past. It's not evolving the way we saw it evolve in the last 50, 70, 80 years. So from the advent of the newspaper to evolution to radio, and then subsequently to television and digital media, we realized that the future of media is changing at a very fundamental level, and the way media will be consumed will be very, very different in times to come. So the tectonic shift that came in media is that the medium per se has changed as a medium where one entity talks to everyone, from that paradigm to where everyone talks to everyone. And that is something which is a very significant change in the media industry per se, because I'll give an example. When we read, let's say when we read a newspaper or any document, we read left to right, right? That's how the human brain is configured. That's how we process information. And then after reading the headline or the byline, we form an opinion whether we want to read the article. And if we like it further, then we read the whole article. And then we form an opinion about it, whether you agree or disagree. But now with video content, that's not the case, because you are actually not getting a chance because of AI, because of machine learning. You only get the kind of content that you want to consume. So the opportunity or the opportunity to have an alternative point of view or to agree to disagree is also being changed. And that's a very good example of how significantly, the medium is changing. So whether you decide whether you want to read it or you don't want to read that article, whether you agree or disagree, is an opinion that you will come to after you've read the article. Whereas when you start looking at content, which is, through your digital sites or your mobile phone or whatever, now you're being fed the similar kind of content which you already are consuming. So machine learning is actually changing your viewership and consuming habits, as in terms of how to shape a narrative or how to change a perspective. So earlier people could look at multiple perspectives and then form their opinion. Now that's not the case. So that was just quoting an example of how things have changed. And so we realized that the future of the news media particularly does not lie in the way it has been in the past. So uh, you know one of the biggest problems in the news media is subscription revenues, whether it's Wall Street Journal, whether it's The Economist, whether it's New York Times. They're all struggling to have an alternative revenue stream other than advertising today. And the biggest reason for that was that, the content consumers are not getting a value proposition, and that's why they're not ready to pay monies for it. So as long as they don't get a value proposition in return. So the reason that communities find it much easier to monetize their content is one of those very good examples which sets apart mainstream and general content from specified content. So I'll give you an example. We started a new vertical about 6 years back called Legally Speaking. Now, Legally Speaking was set up only for the legal community, only for lawyers, by the lawyers, everything to do with the legal ecosystem. When we saw that the opportunity was very good and we started getting traction, it converted into paying subscribers, and that subscription base kept on increasing year on year very significantly. Hence we started doing Medically Speaking and many other verticals like We Women Want, which was again a community only for women, by women, for women issues. So we realized that the future of media is changing in multiple manifestations. It's not simple as in terms of the way we've been seeing television in the linear avatar. That's not how television will grow in future. So the characteristics of content when you consume it from linear content, which I'm talking as a normal television station, have also changed. So, when you look at Netflix, when you look at Amazon Prime Video or any other OTT platform, largely speaking, you look at it and you realize that entertainment content is something that people want to watch at leisure. That's your call whenever you want to watch it. It's when you're comfortable in your home, in your vacation, wherever you want to see it. But that's not the case with news. The urgency and immediacy of news cannot be replaced because that's the nature of the medium. And therefore, irrespective whether you're watching it through television or you're consuming it through social or digital media, you want to know news when it's happening exactly there and then. And that's also true for sports, because even in sports that happens. But that's not true for entertainment and other leisure products. So this entire industry, whether it's print, whether it's video, whether it's any other aspect of the media industry, is changing at a very, very fast pace. And there's no one in control of it. There's no one decides. And frankly, there's no gap in it between what's happening in India or what's happening in the rest of the world as well. Because we are all faced with the same challenges, same problems, same opportunities at the same time. So if you were, media is pretty much evolving the same way. In India as it is evolving in North America or Europe or Middle East for that fact. Obviously, there are different factors and local factors which come into play, which determine the outcome and how people react to it, and then the geopolitical situations and the social economic situations which have an impact on it. And as we saw in the Arab Spring in the Middle East, or we've seen in many other countries in Europe in the past decade or so. So, and I think that's one of the major reasons, is because the power within the media per se space has gone away from the editors who used to decide what content you want to watch, and editors had the responsibility of deciding what you will watch and what you will like. Well, that has been replaced by the viewers and the consumers themselves. So frankly, the way the entire space is evolving is it's not to a finite point, or it's not in a particular manner that this is how the space will evolve, but we are all going through the same curve at the same time all over the world. And that's the commonality between India and any other part of the world where media is evolving and changing. Also to talk a little bit about this is pure say media business, but because media is also the fourth pillar in the fourth estate and has a huge responsibility when it comes to a democracy, and in terms of ensuring a system of checks and balances between the executive, the judiciary, the legislature, also. So it also becomes extremely important for media to become the watchdog and bring to the forefront what needs to be corrected and what is going wrong. And that's a responsibility which media has. And in India, I must say that we are the largest news television bouquet of number of channels in the world. We have about 900 channels, out of which about 600 channels are from news space itself. That is also because of the fact that we have multiple languages and multiple derivatives of the languages. And in order to give news and entertainment, you have to have different subsets of that. But having said that, I mean, I think international media has been very unkind to Indian media by not giving it the space and then trying to put it down for the longest time when it comes to transparency and other aspects. But we in Indian media feel very strongly about it because we feel that media has played a very significant role in the formation of the country, in the way the country has bounced back and the highs and lows that India has seen its last 75 years as a democracy. So, from the point in time that, India had gone in a very, very bad position from 1991, where we had to almost pawn most of our gold reserves to actually survive from that point to this point where India today has become, as a country. Let me just share a couple of facts with you. We are now the largest social food security program in the world India is running. We are feeding more than 800 million people on daily basis by the state for the last 30 months consecutively, which is the biggest social program of its kind in the world. Also, not only that, I mean, during the entire Corona period, I mean, India managed to manufacture and administer free of cost 2 billion doses of Corona vaccine, and also export it to the world. So it's a big shift from where India was in 1991 to where India has reached today, and the media has played a very pivotal role in the growth story of India. And I've been a part of it, and I've got a chance to see it. I was always very interested in actually working in the interest of public and people and seeing what can be done, because the level of disparity in our country is very high and large, and what can you do to actually work towards it. So I decided to join politics, and about 6 months ago I contested as a independent member of parliament. I had the good fortune where I was supported by all political parties in my election, which is a rare thing to find. And because of the advantage that I had as a media background, that gave me a perspective to deal with things and address issues, how in terms of how to move forward. Let me share an experience with you in a project that I'm working on right now. Is one of the biggest problems in India is unemployment. We are the youngest country in the world. More than 35%, more than 65% of our population is under the age of 35. And that presents us with the unique problem of employment. I mean, because there's only so many jobs that you can create in the formal sector. There's only so many jobs that you can create in the government sector. So we've not been able to tap in our, the potential of the informal and the unorganized sector, or the vocational sector and the skill development space. And that is one of my pet projects which I've been working on. And the biggest problem with this particular space is that, while you educate younger people, you're giving them, you're skilling them, you're giving them an education to get a livelihood. The problem is that the government intends on running most of these programs right now. And ultimately, even after getting an education, they don't end up finding a job. And that's because it's completely data dark. There is no information in terms of what is the demand of which skill set in which part of the country. And when you're skilling and giving an education to a young person, do they get employed based on the skill set that they've acquired? So, for instance, there are about 90 job roles that the government has defined in the new education policy, where vocational training is being made a part of the curriculum. And from the 9th form onwards, ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th, they would be having the option of being able to get an education from skilling, right from becoming a data entry operator to an electrician to a carpenter to a plumber to various other different segments like general medical caregiver and so on and so forth. And the the biggest problem why successive governments have failed in the past, we ended up studying it very minutely, is that while the government's job is to give an education and they're running most of these programs, government is not the employer. The employer is the corporate sector. So, another example I'll quote just to, take this point forward is one of the unicorn companies in India is called Urban Clap, which is basically a manpower supply company. And the biggest challenge they're facing today, and the reason they're not being able to grow beyond the valuation they've achieved so far, is because of the trained manpower and the level of attrition that they're getting. So we realized that because there's no data, we're completely data dark in terms of what the demand is for which skill set. There is no way that you can create a successful program which will actually end up getting employment for the younger people. So we ended up talking to all the larger companies, and we appealed to them under the corporate social responsibility program that why don't you start training these people under that program so that they are employable, because you end up spending 3 to 6 months in training workforce when you hire them. Now, this will contribute to your bottom line, while the monies you spend will come from your corporate social responsibility fund, which actually doesn't come out of your kitty. It comes out of the 1% that you have to spend as being corporate, being socially responsible. While you do that, these people become your ambassadors and will actually accentuate the business for you on the ground, and will be able to generate revenue for you without taking anything away from your existing businesses. So now we are now working very closely with the Skill Development Ministry, HRD, Google, Facebook, and a number of other entities, Paytm, to create a grid which will actually map what is the quantum of the skill set required in different fields in different parts of the country geographically, so the younger people know exactly that whether they get $500 or $700 or $1,000 in whatever skill set they are choosing to acquire. So within the Delhi NCR region per se, hospitality has just had a good bounce back. It's like a V-shaped recovery the hospitality segment has done post-COVID. And there's a huge acute shortage of, hospitality staff, because suddenly they'd gone out of jobs and now they're back in business. And the business is booming. So what do? So now the average person who used to make somewhere around about 30,000 rupees in a starting job is getting 40,000 rupees. Now that's crucial information for those people in the informal sector to get, so that they can actually skill themselves according to the best paying job for them. And who is doing the job, the training of the program? Hyatt or Taj is doing the training of the program. So if you want to train a plumber, the plumber program is being done by Kohler or American Standard for that fact. And similarly, when it comes to medicine, it's being done by Medanta. When it comes to, so different verticals are being pioneered by corporate initiatives, which is actually helping their bottom line and furthering their businesses while helping and being socially responsible towards the people. And it's not limited to their geographical area. It's open to them wherever it matters. So in a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is that there's a huge advantage of if you know what you want to do and if you know how you want to go about it, to create a mechanism which can work and ultimately benefit people by large. So now, as a part of that program, now we are very shortly going to be launching that, where a grid of this kind does not exist anywhere in the world. Now, because this data is only on the supply side in terms of skilling, the demand cannot be quantified in a traditional manner. So therefore, we have asked all third-party platforms like Google, like Facebook and Paytm and so many others to actually get that information from them, so that we can create that entire ecosystem based on that information grid, which will allow them to move forward. Now, that's just one example of how we've been able to move forward within the government space, taking a very educated perspective to how to solve a problem which successive governments have not been able to do in the past. I can go on talking, but if there's anything in particular that we'd like to converse about, or
My name is Juno, and I'm an entrepreneur from California. Learned a lot about the general ecosystem here, about just like how business friendly everything has been from like Invest India and other leaders in India. So one thing I was actually curious about, you're mentioning a lot about public-private opportunities to collaborate and like build like new sources of talent or have ways to go and invest into creating other career opportunities. Are there other areas within the government or within like public policy that you see as like places where the public and private institutions can go and work together?
Absolutely. I think that's been the focus of the government over the last 2 years, particularly. And as a result, you see the maximum number of unicorns that came up in the last year were from India. And that is because the startup policy in India is one which is quite encouraging. And like I said, the bulk of the focus has shifted from just, I mean, in India, we had a mindset where everyone wanted stability, and stability meant a government job. That was the mindset for the longest time. Now people have started moving away from that, and you have to create new avenues and opportunities. One of the examples that I'd like to share with you is a person who's a good dear friend. His name is Mr. Sharma, and he's the founder of Paytm. Now, he comes from a very, very humble family and a very humble background, and someone who was very smart with the right idea at the right time. And today he's running one of the largest payment gateway services in the world, with more than 380 million subscribers who transact on daily basis, or just on the Paytm platform right now. So, there are the idea of the government has been two-pronged. One, to create an ecosystem which helps businesses grow and thrive at a very nascent level. And second, also to look at the public-private partnership, because I don't think, and that's also a personal opinion, which I also quite agree with the government, that there are a lot of areas where the government should not do business. I mean, that's not for the government to do business. The government should play the role of a facilitator, should play the role of someone who actually helps and paves the way for the private companies and the entities to actually do well. I happened to be with the National Highways Minister yesterday. We had a program with him during a capital dialogue, and we were just talking about how things are changing with efficiencies that are being brought in. So while NHAI is right now one of the world's largest road building companies in terms of the quantum of highways they're building, I think they're touching right now 60 kilometers per day in India right now. And with the thought process that, that the businesses have largely been, we've been able to grow that infrastructure space because private money has been able to come into it. Obviously, the government has played, a facilitator's role over there. But because that money came in, today there is about, I think just the e-tags which were implemented about 6 months ago earned $1.2 billion in the last 6 months through those processes and systems. So I personally believe that the government should not do business everywhere, and the government is creating more opportunities for that in multiple ways. So I gave you an example of Paytm. I'm also giving an example of the digital e-payment system. Today we are sitting on the world's largest digital payment system, which has been implemented in the last 2 years, which helped us extensively during the Corona period, where we have moved from a system in a country where, I remember one of our previous prime ministers said it back in the day, about 40 years ago, that we send 1 rupee from Delhi, and only 10 paisa reaches the villages. And from that point to today, where 100% of subsidies are directly transferred into the accounts of the person who's to get the benefit and the advantage. So that's only been, it's possible because there's been digital transformation of that extent and of that size and scale in the country.
Thank you, sir, for your time and for hosting us. My name is JJ. I have a question around the media landscape, specifically as it relates to news. We come from the U.S., or at least a U.S. institution, and what we see there is a very polarizing space, right? It's you have news on the left and you have news on the right. How is that here in India, and how did that manifest itself for you to run as an independent candidate?
So, Gigi, it's a good question. I must say that, when I said that the world has changed in the last 10 years, so has the media as well, in many ways. There was this assumption that the media is actually run by some people who are not social animals or who are not part of society, which is not correct. They are as much affected as a judge in a judiciary is, or any other part of a society where society gets impacted. So media also has its perspectives, also has its leanings, and rightfully and wrongfully, I will not argue. I mean, they're all right with their own perspective. But I would say that what has also happened is that we have moved from a very structured and a formal medium to a unstructured and an informal medium. So the digital and social media and the dispensation is all about being informal. It's not that you're going to suit up and read the news in a particular script in a manner. That's the opening montage. This is how the opening tune comes, and blah blah blah, and in a very civilized manner, or should I say a very British manner, the way we were taught how news is broadcasted back in the day, when in the BBC, when it was started in the 50s, and to showcase news in a particular light. I think the entire idea of digital and social media is to break the norm. People have different ideas and people have different philosophies, and rightfully so. We are all entitled to have our own belief system. So there's no one who can say it's right or wrong. The only problem is when you start transgressing on the other's rights. And that is where I think media does some overstepping, and that happens in the US and in India as well. So I mean, everyone is not cast in the same bucket, and everyone doesn't have the same. I mean, there are people who might disagree with, let's say a Hannity and a Com show, or a Bill O'Reilly, and where people might even disagree with the CNN and a couple of others. So it doesn't matter whether you're a liberal or a Democrat or a Republican, for that fact. Even in India, I think there is the one thing which is very, very, very different, is that everyone is entitled to their perspective. I was at the IPU recently in Rwanda. I want to share this. IPU is the Inter-Parliamentary Union, where about 1,200 MPs from 190 countries come together. And there's a General Assembly where I was representing India in about 3 standing committees on different areas. And we were a part of the Asia Pacific group, and we obviously the hot topic in Rwanda about 2 months ago was the Ukraine conflict, and we were talking about that. And a lot of MPs asked us that, why is India buying oil from Russia? Why should you be buying oil from Russia? Unfortunately, the reality of the matter is that we are buying far less oil from Russia than the whole of West buying gas from Russia. So actually the quantum of gas being brought from whole of Western Europe and North America is much higher. So all I'm trying to say is that there are always perspectives, whether it's domestic or international, and there's nothing right or wrong. And we are entitled to have our own perspectives. So same goes for media, and within the media itself, you can call it a left perspective or a right perspective or a centrist perspective. But I think we should not castigate the media for having their opinion. They are entitled to have so. I think it only strengthens a democracy and makes it more vibrant. That's all I have to say.
Hi, thank you so much for hosting us. My name is Andres. I'm from Mexico originally, and I have a bit of a follow-up question to the media industry that you were just talking about. As you mentioned, it's a rapidly evolving landscape. It's coming from from the model that you were taught in the 50s into evolving into a very decentralized landscape of a lot of content creators. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the interesting models that you've seen working here in India or abroad, or you've seen a successful collaboration between government or manager and this?
Absolutely, Andres. I think the biggest challenge today for structured media and media houses, whether it's in print or television, is independent content creators. The paradigm has moved in the favor of independent content creators, where individuals are actually generating more traction than companies altogether. And that goes to show that we are doing something wrong and we're doing something inefficiently. And we at our company were one of the first people to actually realize that and start working towards it. Today, news as a general commodity does not have many takers because everyone wants to know what they want to know at the point they want to know. It's not gone are the days where they will show you what you want to see and you'll buy that. You're only buying what you want to read. I mean, you're pretty much made up your mind before you want to read it. So, that's the change. People are far more informed. We have some typical problems in India. I mean, I don't know if you know or not, but while newspapers have almost stopped printing in many parts of the world, India still was the fastest growing newspaper market before COVID. And that is because of the demand and supply gap between the literacy rate in India. So even people who are, I mean, to explain it further, I'll say those who are educated and literate can read and write and can form an opinion on their own. Those who aren't would consume video content, and they get influenced far more than video content than actually text content, because their basic sensibility to define right and wrong is already established because they have been literate and they're educated. Whereas the uneducated people get far more influenced by video content, and that's something which you've seen, which is very typical to India. Now, we can't take a China example because, you don't have that in China, where you don't have freedom of expression in the sense that you do in India, where you can say whatever you want to say. And that's a very, very big factor because that changes things very, very fundamentally. I think in the last, we've seen like I said, the Indian democracy has been very vibrant, very resilient. We've seen highs and lows in India. We've gone to the point where we've seen emergency being imposed in India, where during a certain government, the fundamental rights of every citizen were suspended for a long period of time. And from that point to a resilient democracy in the way we've seen in the last couple of years, I think we've come a long way from that point. Also, if you look at the neighborhood that India has been, or all the other countries which got independence when India got back in 1947, whether it's Pakistan, Bangladesh, anyone around us, I think we have been able to build a very stable democratic setup, which is managed to grow in spite of the problems that we have, in spite of the uniqueness, I would say, and the vibrance that India has because of diverse cultures, religions. Being a democratic country, we have to abide by the rule of law. We have infrastructure, growth. And I must give the credit to the Honorable Prime Minister. I'm an independent member of Parliament. I don't prescribe to any political party. But I would say that I'm really influenced by him because he is the most successful story that independent India has seen in the longest time. You see, if you look at his life story and his background, he started off at a very humble beginning and started off on a tea stall selling as tea. From that point to becoming the Prime Minister of a country, he has actually been able to inspire confidence in the youth of the country because, nothing succeeds like success. And the best aspiration is success, a model of success. And that is what the Honorable Prime Minister has done. Not only that, the way infrastructure changes have been made, the way policies have been implemented, the way ease of doing business has been done in the country, the way which has allowed us to grow exponentially in different manifestations. All of that has been possible in the last 8 years at a very exponential rate. That is something which, today we are the 5th largest economy in the world, growing at 7% year on year. Whereas, when the rest of the world is right now, looking at a slowdown and with a much higher inflation rate, we are still in a very good position because our fundamentals are very strong. And the way the India story is growing or is poised to grow, I think a number of factors, because of the government's policies, are responsible for it. Whether it is the systematic change on bringing everything into the formal economy, whether it was demonetization. People very often question these decisions, but it has actually helped fuel the growth of the country. And all I can say is that, we are looking for a very bright future.
Hello, my name is Mario, and I'm from Honduras. And my question is related to your role as the youngest member of Parliament, and specifically, I would like to understand what the priorities of the younger generation of Indians are, and how you're giving a voice to this generation.
Hi, Mario. I'm not the youngest. I'm one of the youngest, so I'll correct that. But yes, I think being a younger MP, the responsibility is more because you are representing a segment which is the largest segment, like I said earlier. So almost 65% of our population is under the age of 35. And the problems faced by the younger people are something which perhaps are not very easily understood by other people because, back in the day, the generation changes used to happen after 20, 30 years. Today, there are generational gaps within 10 years or even smaller periods of time. And the relatability with what is that the youth needs, how do they think, what is it that they want, it's really changed a lot. Most of the people within that age in India have a very different mindset. They are past that colonial hangover. They're born in independent India. They don't think they owe anything to anyone. They want to make a good life for themselves. They want to grow in life. They want to build, get a good education. They want to grow. Their whole aspiration matrix is very different. The way of thinking is very different. And I think the biggest responsibility as a younger member of parliament is to voice their opinions. How do they feel it? Also, what kind of a cultural system do we imbibe and we want to propagate, and how do we want to move forward? Because we have a very rich traditional culture, history going back thousands of years, which is something that we are very emotional about as well and hold very closely to our heart. I mean, I'll give you an example from the state I come. We have just found in the state of Haryana, Hisar, Rakhi Gadi is the oldest settlement which has been found almost 20 years back, but the real work has just started now. It's a settlement which is close to 7 to 8,000 years old, much older than Indus Valley civilization, Mohenjo-daro or Harappa, or whatever we've read in the history book so far. The human skeletons they found are supposed to be more than 7,000 years old. So I'm talking about that kind of a history and this kind of a opportunity in young India, which I was talking earlier. Also, the reason I was talking is that in spite of the fact that we have younger MPs and younger politicians, the youth want success. They're doers. They want to achieve something in life. And that's why they look up to the Prime Minister, who's not exactly young. I mean, he's in his 70s, but he's someone who's gone from the very bottom to the very top of the country and has actually showcased to the youth of the country that you don't need to come from a political family. You don't need to come from a business family. You can actually come from nowhere and still reach the top position of the country and transform a country like India. And take it to a different paradigm altogether. I think that's what Young India is about. I think that's what Young India wants. It's not only necessarily that I'm young, so therefore I know what they want. It's also about what they feel and how they want to get to that point. And I think Prime Minister Modi is the epitome of what youth in India want. They want to succeed. And they want to succeed in a way where to bring about a change while being true to their culture, heritage, at the same time be progressive and actually make a good life for themselves and grow. I mean, that's what the youth of the country want.
Hi, how are you? My name is Beatriz from Venezuela. Thank you so much for having us. We have learned in the past few days how diverse India is as a country in terms of tradition, even language, so many things, right? So I'm just curious to know how these create so many challenges to the media business. How do you address them, and how something that makes the country so rich can be so hard in business too?
Patrice, that's a good question in terms of, it's not, doesn't have a simplistic answer. The diversity and is in India actually is problematic, but at the same time creates multiple opportunities as well. I mean, I can't think of any country in the world where you have to think of more than 30 languages within the same country when you're communicating. So while there is diversity, there's also an opportunity. See, largely, there's the large portion of India from north, east, and west is largely Hindi spoken because you have the Hindi belt, and then you have the vernacular languages and the southern languages. I think the biggest challenge over here is that the concept of India is not dependent on languages. And it's in spite of having different subcultures, different languages, we come together as a country, and that coming together and the whole idea of India is what India is all about. And that's what the whole philosophy of Bharat is, And I think from a media perspective, you have to also understand that the way media has changed in India also, like the rest of the world, it is now become more sensitive to what people want, and because ultimately, like I often talk to my editors, some of my editors are here, very senior colleagues of ours, and I tell them that, your role has really gone down. Your positions are compromised now, because earlier you were the boss of what is to run and what is not to run, what people will see, what they will not see, what will you print, what will you not print, what will you broadcast and telecast. Suddenly your role is now limited to deciding what to show first and what to show later, and to what extent and how. So, those are the kind of challenges which are also very similar to the diversity in India, which are anywhere else in the world, whether it's Venezuela or any other part of the world. So I think there are huge amount of commonalities over there, but at the same time, that diversity acts as a catalyst for bringing in change. I mean, people now, you don't need to be a journalist to get your content out there. While that is true, during the corona, the entire one thing to take away from the corona epidemic was that, you can't trust everything you get on WhatsApp, and you can't trust everything you find on social media. There was a big impetus which was shift back to mainstream media for the credibility of the news during that period, because news was somewhere losing to digital and social media before that, and all of that changed suddenly, because people were getting fed all sorts of information, not knowing what is right, what is wrong, and what to consume and what not to consume. So I think, like I said, it's an evolutionary process. It sort of course corrects itself, and it's not in anyone's control, or neither does it have a finite point. So we will evolve into something, we don't know exactly what it will be, but it is something for people to decide themselves. And the driver of that change will be the consumers, the viewers themselves, the readers themselves, not people sitting in offices deciding what people want to read.
My name is Yafet Tella. Thank you so much for making time having us over here. I have two questions, but I'm going to go with one since we are pressed for time. In our time in India, it's been a place of strong contrast, from a long history to a country that's new, from strong economic growth, but also strong large number of people struggling in poverty and growing. We spent our morning in New Delhi and then went to Leela Palace, and it's the contrast is strong. But I would love to hear from you as a member of parliament, what initiatives need to be taken place to be able to help uplift the large percent of the population that's still struggling, and what needs to start or continue or stop?
See, I mentioned something earlier on. It's the problems that India has are in no way very easy. I mean, we have huge problems, and there is a problem of inequality that needs to be addressed, because that has been the case for a long period of time, over decades. But at the same time, what must be appreciated is that, there is no other example that India can be compared to for its sheer size and scale. The only other example you could compare it to was China. But, the socio-political system is not exactly the same. So, things have been very, very different over there, and perhaps is an incorrect example. But whether it's the biggest food security program, whether it is direct benefit transfer, or whether it is, we just did a story yesterday on NewsX, our national channel, where one of the villages in Kashmir just got electricity yesterday after 75 years of independence. Now, that is a reality we have to deal with. That is the real India. But because you have to also provide for them and grow at the same time, your growth cannot be stilted. You cannot say that let's get everyone out of poverty first and then we'll grow. It doesn't work like that. We have to actually grow and actually help the people who need it the most. And that is something that this government has been doing very effectively. When we talk about the digital direct transfer, it might seem a very inane thing for most of the people coming from the developed world. But trust me, it's a very, very big thing. We had something close to hardly 30 million bank accounts about 7 years back. And today we have something close to more than 650 million bank accounts all over the country. Now that's a step in the right direction. That's a step in stopping the leakages. That's actually ensuring that the monies that government is spending actually reaches the people and the last person in the line. How do you ensure that with a country and a population of this size and scale, which is not possible in any other way? So we are using technology to our advantage. We are actually using it as an enabler. in multiple ways. So, I'll give you the example. The biggest campaign launched by the Prime Minister and this government when it came in back 8 years back was a hygiene program called the toilet program, which was it was the first time where we manufactured and, made the maximum number of toilets in the country. And that was a problem. It was a social problem which needed to be addressed. Now, development doesn't just mean giving monies to people or giving an opportunity. It also means creating an environment for the basic dignity of the human being to grow. And for that, you need to have work at multiple levels. A toilet is a very, very basic requirement which one would think, but it wasn't there. So, the government has actually made a program to build a toilet in every house of this country. And they're continuously hammering and working on it, realizing how important it is. So it's a culmination of a number of these factors, a number of these programs that will pull India out of the position it is, will help us. And I think I wouldn't be biased in saying that we are poised to keep on growing like this. If we do, we had the 5th biggest economy in the world, and frankly, if God is kind, all goes well, we would be in the top 3 slot in a very short time span. And that is also, mind you, keeping the democratic value system intact in place, growing on that. Now that has been the biggest challenge, and that is what shows resilience of India. Thank you, guys. I've got to push off somewhere, and I'll come back and chat with you all.